This is quite ironic because while PSPower makes his YouTube return video, I do too. And quite frankly, it's right near the time of WrestleMania 30, which I will be at live. I don't know if PSPower will be. Highly doubt it because, as far as I know, he's never been to any one of them live. But I figure I have to make this response because, quite frankly, PSPower just amazes me with his argument status. Because he titles this video The Snakeman and the Yesman. Well, there was a third man in here, and it's called the Strawman, and that's pretty much what PSPower's nickname is going to be within this good old video. So, let me go through this video. I'm going to play it on the smartphone, which is actually smarter than me right now because it just turned off. But here we are. I don't know if you guys can hear it, but this should kind of settle the Strawman argument that he presents. But let's hear this.
As I've said before, it seems that in this post-attitude era, any time a wrestler starts getting pops, the fans automatically want to make him world champion. You know, like Carlito's getting pops, make him world champion. Matt Hardy's getting pops, make him world champion. Jeff Hardy's getting pops, make him world champion. Daniel Bryan's getting pops, make him world champion. But the thing about all this is, why?
I want to stop it right there because this is where the straw man really kicks in. PSPower's argument is, why should we make them world champion just because they get world or get pops? First off, that's the straw man argument that he presents here, that because they get that pop, that we should automatically make them world champion. I don't think anybody's agitated that we should automatically give Jeff Hardy the world title because he first came in and got a pop. I don't think anybody's ever agitated that. I don't think anybody was ever thinking to their minds that Jeff Hardy was ever going to win the world title. And the same thing could be said about Matt Hardy, Carlito, and even Daniel Bryan. I think the argument that's being made, PSPower, is that they're generating enough pops. They are being built as stars that are going to eventually be the catalyst to what the main event status is supposed to be, and that they should eventually win the world championship, especially if they're being built towards that. At one time, Carlito, Matt Hardy, and Jeff Hardy, at one point or another, were being built as guys who were going to win the championship at one point. The same thing is going to be said about Daniel Bryan, because the current storyline is that Daniel Bryan is going to win the world championship after being held down so much by the Authority. You don't seem to realize that. That's the storyline here. The story being told is that Daniel Bryan is going to win the title, the Kabbalist title that everybody has fought hard. Some have succeeded, some have failed. And Daniel Bryan's story is that he's being held down, and for reasons that you specifically put him down later on, is that he's too small to hold the title, that he can't hold the title because he's too small and doesn't have the right look. Well, he's trying to conquer that theory that you don't have to have that look to become the champion, you just have to be the best. That's storyline purposes, but that is why we want him to win. We want him to win the big one due to the storyline that's being built around him. The same was said for Matt Hardy, Jeff Hardy, and Carlito prior. But you don't take that into account. You just think that because they're getting pops, that we automatically want them to be world champion. I never once insinuated that when Daniel Bryan first debuted in NXT, that, oh, we got to make him world champion. Never once said that. If I did, I retract that statement. The idea is that he's getting enough pops progressively as weeks go by, unanimously. He is generating pops outside of this company. Michigan State, they're doing the yes chant and they're crediting him, even though the originator was Diego Sanchez from the UFC. So you can honestly tell that Daniel Bryan is getting somewhere outside of wrestling other than John Cena. So we're thinking to ourselves, yeah, maybe he should get more than just that main event push. Maybe we should actually do something with this guy and make him our guy, along with John Cena. And what's a good way to do it? Well, give him the title and say he is the guy. Anyways, let's listen to what you have to say, because more of my arguments will come in.
But the thing about all ridiculous is, why? Why? I mean, just because a wrestler's getting pops, and just because you might like him, that doesn't automatically mean he's suitable to be world champion.
And why not? Why not? Other than maybe certain gimmicks, like Santino Marella, why shouldn't he get the world championship? What is it about Daniel Bryan that nullifies his chances of ever winning the world title? There is nothing about Daniel Bryan that would nullify his chances. He is a guy that can go in there, have a great match with pretty much anybody. They have presented him as somebody that can hang. John Cena, his match with John Cena at SummerSlam, people bought into that. Or how about the fact that, again, he is over. Usually one thing that greaters your chance, if that's ever a word, one thing that greatens your chance of being a world champion is that you're over. It's pretty simple. It's a pretty simple concept.
Likewise, just because a wrestler doesn't become world champion doesn't mean he can't be great. After all, icons like Roddy Piper, Mr. Perfect, and Ravishing Rick Rude were never WWE champion. And Daniel Bryan becoming champion doesn't automatically make him an icon. So what's with this fanboy mentality, you know?
Well, hold on there, PSPower. Well, I do agree that, yes, just because you're not a world champion completely, that doesn't mean that you are nullified of the chance of ever becoming an icon. The problem here is that those three examples that you brought up, Roddy Piper, Mr. Perfect, and Rick Rude, were all guys that we have all agitated should have been world champion. We've been going crazy about this notion for a long time. These are three guys that we've always said should have been world champion. And Daniel Bryan is another guy that we think should be world champion. But again, the other thing that you're forgetting is that you're comparing a completely different time and a completely different era, where it was the Hulkamania era, where pretty much his politics were running wild, just like he's running wild. But the idea is that these three guys are also guys we've agitated should have been world champion and could never figure out why they never were. Roddy Piper, how many times have people said that Roddy Piper should have been world champion? I can't think of how many times people have said that Mr. Perfect's the most underrated wrestler in history. Rick Rude's another guy. These are guys that we have also agitated should have been a world champion at one time or another. Now, granted, they are icons, yes. But the other thing that's added onto it, too, is that these three guys, as far as I could tell, never had the storyline that Daniel Bryan has, which is Daniel Bryan is fighting against a system called the Authority, which is a conspiracy theory, if you want to call it that. But they are a group that are preventing Daniel Bryan from ever winning the title, despite the fact he can. They never had that storyline. But anyways, let's move on.
I think we need to reevaluate what makes a wrestling legend. Let's look at one of the most iconic wrestlers in wrestling history, Jake the Snake Roberts.
Okay, see right there, you're talking about Jake the Snake Roberts. Here's another guy that you are comparing Daniel Bryan to, who did not get a storyline that's based off the fact that he's fighting the system. He never had that storyline. So, of course, when you talk about this guy, of course he didn't need to win the world title, because he never, for one, had a storyline that pretty much had it in the fans' heads that, yes, this guy should be a world champion. Whether you think Jake Roberts should have been a world champion is a whole different ballgame. Some people have said, yes, I'm one of them. I think he could have been a world champion. But nobody has ever thought into their mind that Jake should be the champion, because there was no storyline that progressed him to become such.
Now, as noted in the latest issue of WWE Magazine, Jake the Snake has never won a Royal Rumble, never won a King of the Ring, never held any WWE title, and yet he is going to the Hall of Fame.
This goes back to my argument. I'm not the biggest philosopher, if you want to call it that, of Jake the Snake Roberts' career, because his career was actually around before I was even born, so I never really grew up watching Jake the Snake Roberts. But as far as I can tell, Jake the Snake Roberts never was pushed to win the Royal Rumble, was never pushed to go for a title, other than $1 million title. So my question here is that why should he win a championship when he's not being pushed as such? I mean, there's a reason why Andre the Giant doesn't have many title reigns in the WWE. He was never pushed as such. He was always pushed as the attraction. His attraction was he was fucking huge. He was the biggest guy, not just in wrestling, all around the world. That could be debated, but the whole idea is that in wrestling, he was this larger-than-life character. That's what he was being pushed as. He wasn't being pushed as a champion. Granted, he would go for the title later on when he turned heel, but for the most part, he was never pushed as a guy that was going to go for the world championship. He was just an attraction. From the way it looks with Jake the Snake Roberts, he was an attraction. What separated Jake the Snake Roberts from everybody else? He had the snake. He had Damien. And he brought out Damien, and everybody was crazy to see Damien. What really did they do with Jake Roberts that would agitate that he needed the world title? They never pushed him in that such. He had feuds with other people. He brought out the best in people when it came to those feuds, and that was pretty much his role. I mean, you mentioned that later on, but let's listen.
Indeed. Here we have a guy who's never been world champion, never been Intercontinental champion, never been tag champion, never won any Royal Rumble, never won any King of the Ring, spent his WrestleManias fighting guys like Rick Martel, and never really moved beyond the mid-card. So, by today's fanboy standards, that makes him a loser, right? That makes him a loser.
No one's ever said that. I don't see where you're coming off with this, and this is why you're such a straw man. No one's ever said that. Jake Roberts, like I just mentioned earlier, was never pushed as such. In fact, let me continue with this video because you mentioned a couple of names here.
That makes him inferior to Big E Langston because Big E Langston is Intercontinental champion, right? That makes him inferior to Jack Swagger because Jack Swagger is a former world champion, right?
Look, this is where your straw man comes in. Jake was never pushed as a champion, as I said. Of course, Jake is not going to be looked as inferior to Big E Langston and Jack Swagger, because these are guys who were given a title and done nothing with. Look at Big E Langston. He's the Intercontinental champion. What are they doing with the Intercontinental title? This is why we constantly complain about the Intercontinental title, because it's never pushed as a big title. The only title that seems to ever matter in this company is the WWE title. Usually, if you win the WWE title, that's where it matters. Which is why we want Daniel Bryan to win the title that matters. When Jack Swagger won the World Heavyweight title, did it matter? No, he held it for 2 months and did nothing with it. So I see the point. Yes, the man makes the title doesn't make the man. But the whole idea is that promotion usually builds around what they think matters. And for whatever reason, they don't think the Intercontinental title matters. So they slap it on to Big E Langston, and of course, nobody cares because he's not doing anything as the Intercontinental Champion. Which is why the Intercontinental Championship means shit. Daniel Bryan going after the WWE title matters because they have built a storyline where people are interested and will buy tickets. The other thing, too, on why they have done this is because, well, they have soon realized that Randy Orton versus Batista was not going to help sell the network. Why? Because the network's first pay-per-view that is going to be held on there is WrestleMania. And what are people's first impressions going to be when they buy the network and their first pay-per-view main event, the two main guys who are fighting for the title get completely booed out of the building? Which is also another argument as to why Daniel Bryan should be the champion. Because if he wins the championship, then guess what? You're going to get cheers at the end of the WrestleMania main event. Not boos. So let's continue.
Inferior to Jack Swagger because Jack Swagger is a former world champion, right? No! As we all know, it's the other way around. As an icon of the sport, Jake the Snake currently towers over guys
which
like
I just covered, but go ahead.
Swagger. And I don't even think they would disagree with that. But how could this be? How is this possible?
I already explained that, but let's hear your explanation.
Never really want anything like Jake the Snake tower so tall. It's because today's wrestling fans have their values all mixed up, right? Listen,
values mixed up. How?
Russo could become a 10-time world champion and still never measure up to Jake the Snake.
Now you're bringing Vince Russo into this argument. And what does Vince Russo have to do with any of this? Vince Russo's a booker that put himself into the fucking storylines. What does Vince Russo have to do with this?
It's not just about giving popular wrestlers title reigns. It's about leveraging a wrestler's strengths with appropriate pushes that may or may not involve title reigns.
Okay. As you said, appropriate pushes that may or may not involve title reigns. Well, Jake the Snake Roberts' push did not involve title reigns. Daniel Bryan's current push does involve a title reign. Get it?
As people in the industry have said, even though Roddy Piper was never world champion, he never really needed it. And the same holds true for Jake the Snake.
I've heard more people agitate for the fact that Roddy Piper should have won the world title, because they've always made that argument that the chase is what sells more pay-per-views. So the babyface chasing for the title would sell more pay-per-views. Why do you think Ric Flair, during the 80s, always held the title? Because what sold their show, or in their case, what drew people to watch their big shows, was the chase on somebody beating Ric Flair for the title. Same thing could be said if Roddy Piper would have won the title. What do you think would have sold more pay-per-views or gotten bigger ratings? Obviously, Hogan going after the belt, because usually, historically proven, the chase sells more pay-per-views. I mean, eventually the babyface has to get the title, but the whole idea is that the chase actually does matter. And eventually, once they get to the chase and they actually capture the title, it's going to mean a lot. Which in this case, if Daniel Bryan wins at WrestleMania 30, it will mean a whole lot. In the same way that he who shall not be named 10 years ago won the title. In my, well, not my hometown, but you get the picture.
Any of you, I can't even imagine Jake the Snake holding a title belt. It just doesn't fit, He's not that type of character. He's not flashy, like a Shawn Michaels or John Cena.
Well, we could throw this argument back at you. You said to us earlier that apparently that just because we like Daniel Bryan doesn't mean he should be the champion. Well, just because you don't imagine Jake the Snake Roberts as the world champion doesn't mean that he shouldn't be the world champion. See how the shoe fits on the other foot?
Holding his mini belt, He was more like the opposite of that. Jake the Snake was the anti-Shawn Michaels. He was the anti-John Cena. He was this unglamorous, no-nonsense, blue-collar straight shooter that would just walk down to the ring and took care of business, right? You never really saw him like, well, look at me, he wasn't like that.
Which is why I'm saying that Jake the Snake Roberts and Daniel Bryan are two completely different characters, and why you're comparing them to each other is completely beyond me. But you just basically said yourself why Jake the Snake Roberts doesn't really need the world title. But I explained to you earlier, it's not just his character, it's just they never pushed him as such. And there you go. They never pushed him.
When he came down to the ring, he had no costume, no headgear, no pyro, no fancy entrances, but yet, somehow we loved him. He had us in the palm of his hands, his finger, literally. All he would do was twirl his finger in the air, and we'd be like, yeah, he had us trained, literally.
The same thing could be said about Daniel Bryan. All he has to do is put his two fingers up in the air like this. He doesn't even have to say the word. He just has to go like this, and the fans usually chant right back, yes. A 3-letter word that involves one vowel, technically two.
He had us trained with his finger. His one little finger generates more pops than most of today's roster. Think about that. Think about what makes a wrestler truly popular. And it's not just bright colors, fancy entrances, and pyro. But despite his immense popularity, the WWE never gave Jake the Snake Roberts a title reign. They never gave him a Royal Rumble. They never gave him a King of the Ring. And they never let him out of the mid-card.
And they never gave him a storyline that would warrant him to ever win the World Championship. Unlike Daniel Bryan.
Does that mean the WWE used Jake the Snake improperly? No! In fact, the opposite is true. Jake the Snake's WWE run is legendary.
I don't know how many times I have to say it, but in order to prove the same point by saying it differently, they misused Booker T. How? Because in the lead up to WrestleMania 19, the guy was being built as a guy who was a thug, who was a criminal, who couldn't amount to ever being a world champion. When you create a story like that, it creates that aura that, yes, maybe Booker T should win, because it would be a good story to tell, that this was once a criminal, a thug, who changed his life around, and now all he has to do is win the title and prove to everybody that he's no longer that thug. What happened at WrestleMania 19? He lost to Triple H, which Triple H had no business winning. And guess what? What did Booker T do after that? Absolutely nothing, and would not win another world title for another 3 years. That is misusing a guy. When you create a story around this guy who was created as a character that would never win the world title, and you build and you build and you build. Now, granted, with Booker T, it was only a couple weeks, but in the case of Daniel Bryan, this has been going on since SummerSlam. So if Daniel Bryan does not beat Triple H at WrestleMania, or if he loses in the triple threat, then that's misusing him, because you created this storyline where he has to conquer the odds. What happens if he doesn't? What happens if the Authority wins? How is that a feel-good story? Yes, the Authority has gotten their wins over Daniel Bryan, so now Daniel Bryan's got to get his win. So yes, that would be misusing him if he doesn't win. Why you're comparing him to Jake Roberts, who never had a storyline even close to this, beyond me.
Because the WWE recognized the nature of the character and leveraged its strengths, which does not necessarily include winning the title. Right? As this unglamorous everyman, Jake the Snake was paired up against cocky assholes like the $1 Million Man, Ravishing Recruit, and the model Rick Martel to unforgettable results. I mean, who could ever forget Jake the Snake pulling down Rick Rude's pants in the middle of the ring and Rick Rude's flopping around on the ground? That stuff's classic.
But see, there you go. You compare Jake Roberts and his feuds. He went after Rick Rude. Guys like Rick Rude. Rick Rude, if I remember the storyline correctly, was smitten with his wife, which was obviously a sin to him. He didn't care about a title, he just cared about ripping Rick Rude's throat out. So when you have a storyline like that, yeah, no, we're not gonna say, go for the title. In the case of Daniel Bryan, he's not facing somebody that's smitten with Brie or Nikki Bella, whichever the one he's dating. I think it was Brie. Nobody's smitten with his wife or his future wife. We're dealing with a situation where the man is preventing him from winning the title in the most completely jerkish way. It's not a case scenario where they create a rule. They actually go intervene in the match and prevent Daniel Bryan from winning. So the storyline here has to be Daniel Bryan eventually winning the title. That's what you're not getting.
And as a heel, Jake the Snake's spine-tingling promos were put to use as he tormented the Ultimate Warrior and the Macho Man. This was a WWE run that did not need a title reign in order to be good. The WWE found a perfect spot for Jake the Snake in the company, and he thrived in it. Which brings us back to Daniel Bryan.
Finally.
He's been getting pops. People like his yes chant.
Exactly. They like his yes chant. Just like you mentioned earlier, they liked when Jake Roberts twiddled his finger.
But even if you like Daniel Bryan, should he become world champion? Is that his role in the company to be...
Yes, because that's what they're building towards.
The face of this company? Think about it. Here we have this pale, undersized guy.
Oh, here we
go. Looks like the Berserker's maniac little brother. Coming out to silly theme music, pointing his fingers in the air. Yes, yes, yes. Yes, yes.
This is where your Strawman comes in. You basically did everything in your power to undermine exactly what Daniel Bryan's character is all about. Daniel Bryan's character he is talented. He can get a good promo. He is very intriguing. He is a guy that we can all relate to. The whole yes thing just is a catapult from what he had been doing earlier to now, where he's now a big baby face that we can relate to when it comes to being held down. And we want him to overcome that odds. It's not like a John Cena storyline where John Cena, he's overcome the odds God knows how many times. This is a situation where Daniel Bryan really has been held down, and he's actually getting close to overcoming the odds. So yes, that warrants a title. I mean, the way you describe it, yeah, that would sound goofy. But nobody would get a full impression by the way you described it.
You want that to be world champion?
Yes, I do,
The
actually.
face of the company?
Yes, I do.
You serious?
Yeah, I am kind of serious.
Let's just say he does win the world title. Now what?
Okay. Let's say he doesn't win the world title. Now what? What do we do from there?
Is he a legend like Jake the Snake now?
If he doesn't win, is he a legend like Jake the Snake now? No, he's a squandered opportunity. That's what it is.
No, not necessarily. Because what's good for the wrestler does not necessarily involve a title win. It's all
In
about
this case, yes, it does.
spot in the company that's right for the wrestler and putting the right people around him so that he can thrive there.
But the whole idea is that he's being surrounded by a gimmick that's holding him down. What is it that you're not getting about this?
Putting Daniel Bryan up against guys like Batista and Triple H, does that come across to you as the same level of quality matchmaking as Jake the Snake and Ravishing Recruit?
Comparing storylines. You're comparing a storyline where Rick Rude was smitten with Jake Roberts' wife to Batista, who came back and won the Royal Rumble, who is Triple H's friend, and Triple H is doing everything in his power to hold Daniel Bryan down. This is a storyline that you're trying to compare, and it doesn't make sense.
No, doesn't feel like it. So in my opinion, it's not just about pushing your favorite wrestler into the main event and having him beat whoever the world champion happens to be. A title win doesn't necessarily guarantee legend status, and becoming a legend doesn't depend on winning a title.
In this case, it does, because, again, that's what they're building towards.
Guys like Jake the Snake and Razor Ramon winning the world title would seem out of place. It wasn't their role in the company. But nevertheless, they're going to the Hall of Fame. So I think some fanboys need to rethink this single-minded thought process of, me like that guy, put him in main event, make him world champion.
And I think you need to get out of the single-minded process of comparing two completely different identities in one guy who was never pushed as a world champion to another guy who's being pushed as a guy who's going to overcome the odds and win the title.
And reconsider for what truly makes a good character and a good product. In fact, I think the opposite has been true. I think that shoving people in the main event scene has been a detriment to the product.
But Daniel Bryan's not being shoved in the main event scene. He's been in the company, what? On screen, that is. Since 2010, and this storyline has been progressing since August. So it's an 8-month storyline. I mean, wasn't that your biggest problem with WWE, was that there was no long progressive storyline? Well, we've got one here. Some of it we've all gotten pissed off at because we thought it would be booked differently. But you know what? It's being booked exactly the way you want it. It's an 8-month-long storyline. And guess what? It's not being rushed at all. I don't get what you're saying when you're saying, oh, put him in the main event.
Has been a detriment to the product. I think that Dolph Ziggler, Jack Swagger, Jeff Hardy, and others should have never become world champions when they did. And even CM Punk's first world title win was way too early.
While I agree that CM Punk's title run, his first one, was way too early, the reason why the other three flopped, and CM Punk's, was not so much that they were given the title too early. It was because of how they were booked. Jeff Hardy's first title run was only a month, and he lost it back to Edge. CM Punk was always booked to feel inferior to everybody else. The same could be said about Dolph Ziggler and Jack Swagger. When you book them to look inferior, they're going to look inferior. Now, say they were booked to be actual threats, and they still couldn't sell for shit, like one of your favorites, Diesel, then that, in my opinion, is what a failure is. Diesel couldn't sell out the fucking Garden as world champion, who was being built exactly what you should be building as a champion.
Like I said in previous videos, I think this whole money in the bank concept has been doing more harm than good to the product. So, yeah, I think some fanboys need to rethink for what truly makes for good characters and a good product. Does the WWE reluctantly putting the world title on Daniel Bryan, is that really for the best? I got my doubts on that.
So, let me get this straight. That's the end of the video. You don't believe that them actually going ahead and taking a risk and giving Daniel Bryan the title actually is good for business. Because quite frankly, with the way your mindset is, you could say the same thing about Steve Austin, because Steve Austin co-headlined WrestleMania 13 with Bret Hart, and the other main event being Undertaker and Psycho Sid. That pay-per-view has the lowest buy rate of all WrestleManias, 270,000 buys, I think. Now, what would it be like if their thought process was after that pay-per-view came and went, and they got the buy rate, and they realized it was so fucking low, that they said, well, we gave Steve Austin a chance, he co-headlined, and we got the lowest buy rate of WrestleMania of all time. Maybe giving him the title isn't what's best for the company. Let's hold back on him a bit. I mean, despite that he's getting Austin 316 chants, everybody's cheering him, we got the lowest buy rate, we're going to blame him. That's what you're saying about Daniel Bryan, and that's what they've done. It's not a surprise. I mean, they blame Miz for the Survivor Series 2011 buy rate. But how is that any better? I think what they should be doing is trying to find somebody that can carry John Cena's spot if John Cena was to ever get hurt. Or if John Cena, for whatever reason, left. Daniel Bryan right now is the closest thing that we've got, because CM Punk is gone. Batista, yeah, you brought him back, and he's getting hated, but even if he wasn't hated, the guy's 45 years old. How long does he have left? Undertaker is on his last leg. Brock Lesnar is a one-time per appearance. Daniel Bryan's your only option. And the fact that you keep bringing these strawman arguments to make a case that Daniel Bryan shouldn't be the champion shows why, in this case scenario, out of any YouTuber, YouTube wrestling shooter, if you want to still call him that, you have got to be the one that creates the most strawman out of everything, because that is what keeps your arguments stable. And to be quite honest, the only thing that is stable at all is maybe your viewer fan base. Other than that, nothing about that argument of Daniel Bryan and Jake Roberts, the comparison, made any blessed sense or was stable. Have a good day.